Good evening, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to another episode of Critique Corner with me, Daniel Parker.
And me, DB Fastbinder. And we've got, we always say that we have an eclectic mix of movies and shows and whatnot, but I think that that word definitely applies to this week's reviews.
Indeed, yes. Yeah, we've got a family animated movie. We've got classic cop drama, and I finally got around to watching a big summer blockbuster from this year, and DB has a nice little comic or a little comic book that he finally got around to reading.
Yep. So I guess we could call this the week of delays because our classic cop drama is also one I've been curious about ever since I heard Paul Chatto talking it up. So
Yes, yeah, but I guess we should guess we should get into our first review.
indeed,
That would be The Imaginary.
The Imaginary, not to be confused with If, and definitely, despite the best efforts of search engines, to confuse it with the 2024 horror movie Imaginary. This is The Imaginary. It's distinct.
Yes. Yeah, it's this is an anime film in the vein of Miyazaki, but not made by Miyazaki or by Studio Ghibli for that matter.
Yeah, which I was actually shocked about because you can definitely see the influence in the character designs, but it looked like they were okay. So the mean way you could put it is that it's knockoff Studio Ghibli, but what it really is it's made by a studio called Studio Panak, which is a group, which was founded by a group of former Ghibli animators who went off to do their own thing.
Yeah, so basically the Japanese equivalent of Don Bluth.
Yep. Yeah, although that does seem to happen pretty frequently over there.
Yeah.
I guess it's because they have I don't know if I would call it healthy given the work conditions, but they have a dynamic animation industries. I think that's a fair word for it.
Yeah. Well, Anno, the creator of Evangelion, I think he started at Ghibli, if I'm not mistaken.
Almost certainly. Then he got into Gainax, and then I don't know if what he does today is still Gainax, but we're very off topic. So
yeah, we are.
So Daniel, I'll give him the quick rundown.
Yeah, so the Imaginary takes place in Great Britain, and it follows a girl named Lizzie, Amanda. Sorry, Lizzie is Amanda's mother. Amanda, who's this? How old would you say she was? About 9, 10?
I think they said 9.
9. Okay. And Amanda has an imaginary friend named Rudger, not Roger, Rudger. She makes a point of making that distinction many times in the film.
Rudger. There are no O's in Rudger.
Yes.
If you get that reference, you probably follow the same political podcasts I do.
Yes. So she basically, she and Roger kind of go on these, imaginary adventures that she creates in her head. And most of that, I won't spoil that part of it, but then one day, a very creepy looking guy who likes to sniff people shows up.
I think the funniest thing in that opening introductory scene is that the mother is shockingly unconcerned. Like while she wants him to leave, she is unconcerned that he is closing his eyes and sniffing in the direction of her daughter.
Yeah. Yes. And of course, Amanda, she can see that with the guy whose name is Mr. Bunting, he has a girl with her. Yeah, that's him right down there. And and the girl, the little creepy Wednesday Addams looking girl, that's his imaginary friend. Did we ever get her name?
Did we ever get her name?
I can't remember.
That would actually, in my opinion, be kind of appropriate that you didn't have a name, considering the way he seems to view imaginary friends.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So Bunting has this weird thing where not only can he see other people's imaginary friends, but he swallows them. Like
He
he just
he
yeah.
eats them to sustain his own life.
Right. Yeah. He's like I think he's like 100 or 200 years old or something like that.
Yeah, he's been at this for a while,
Yeah,
which
and yeah.
which makes this kind of goofy outfit of like, he always walks around in a Hawaiian shirt, just and shorts, just kind of amusing. Like it's in keeping with the movie's aesthetic to have the creepy villain be kind of goofy at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. And so what ends up happening is uh Mr. Bunting is trying to eat Roger, and Amanda tries to stop him, tries to stop him, and then when they're in the parking lot at the grocery store, they run away from him, and then Amanda gets hit by a car.
I think this was at like what, the half hour mark or so.
Yeah, about around there. Yeah.
And in retro, it's kind of I'll give it this. So this is kind of similar to other media I've seen about what happens to imaginary friends, like Foster Home for Imaginary Friends, If, which we reviewed earlier this year. You don't often see them where the imaginary friend is the point of view character.
Right. Yeah. And that's what we got here. Because after Amanda gets hit by the car, Roger starts disappearing, and the gold pixie dust that you see in the image there, that's what starts to happen to him. And then that's when he comes across a very strange looking cat, the one that's right there next to him, with one red eye and one blue eye. And then he tells Roger, hey, there's there's a place where you can go, but if you don't go there soon, you're gonna disappear.
Right.
Yeah.
So there ends up being a imaginary friend sanctuary at the local library, because human imagination is basically the oxygen they breathe, and so being in a library where people are having their minds sparked all the time helps sustain them.
Yes, and what I thought the clever thing that they did was having these imaginary friends from like William Shakespeare and Beethoven, and I can't remember who else was in there. But yeah, so now but Roger, he doesn't want to stay at the library. He wants to go back to Amanda.
Right, because everybody is convinced that she's dead, where he's convinced that she's alive somewhere. She needs him.
Right, and of course the kind of the de facto leader of the imaginary friends is Emily, who's she's the only other human looking imaginary there, and that's that's her off to the right.
Yeah, well, it's not zooming in on the right spot for me, so
yeah.
So yeah, that's the basic conflict. Is Roger is trying to get back to Amanda while she's actually, first find out if Amanda is still alive, and second, if she is, get back to her.
Right.
Even as everybody else is trying to convince him, just forget about it.
Yeah, and then we also kind of find out that Mr. Bunting is kind of like Voldemort to these imaginaries. Like oh no, they don't talk about him.
Right. Even though they're also kind of convinced that he isn't real, but they also know a lot of accurate details about him.
Yeah.
Which, okay, so any sort of fantastical universe like this, you're probably going to have a couple of things that are a little inconsistent, especially in children's media where they don't design it for grognards, basically.
Yeah.
um, what I would say is that I would wonder how they had so many details about him right when they think he is fictional. But there is an element later in the movie that might actually explain that and all that I just tied together right now. But I'll get to that in kind of the more the spoilery section.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this from a strengths and weaknesses perspective. I would say that overall this has an imaginative and nice animation style.
Yes.
They have a good variety of imaginary friends. The kind of reminded me of If, in that you could tell where they're maybe starting to run out of steam trying to pad out a whole retirement home full of imaginary friends. Similar kind of thing here, where some of them weren't as inspired as others.
Yeah.
While I said there are some inconsistencies in the lore, they did come up. They were pretty good at sticking to their rules. Like imaginary friends can't go through walls unless their person imagines them being able to do so. So the characters can actually get stuck in a closed door because they can't interact with the real world, but they still have to obey the restrictions of, can't, like, oh no, I'm stuck in the basement. I hope there's an open window somewhere.
Yeah. 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 And uh, I will say it's like some of the characters are, like are charming in their own way. Like, I mean, Roger's a decent character. Um, and he's kind of like usually with like imaginary friends, like or characters that people they make, somebody makes up. They're like an extension of that person's of their creators' personalities, basically.
Mhm.
Either they are them, or they're people that they wish they could be. And with Roger, it seems more like he's just kind of like the either the best friend or the brother that Amanda never had.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Like, it basically it's so Amanda's the child of a single mother. Well, actually, no, the child of a widow. Her father is. I don't think they ever actually said the words that her father was dead. I thought, like, so there's like a 5% chance in my mind that they might just be divorced and he's far away. But
Yeah,
uh,
I they
I,
kind of insinuated that he died.
yeah, yeah. So basically, she's lonely. Her mom's lonely. Her mom's working hard trying to keep their bookstore alive, though she has ultimately failed because at the start of the movie, she's looking for new work while they're wrapping down or winding down the bookstore.
Yeah,
And so Roger is basically just a solid, dependable person who loves Amanda.
yeah, yeah. Um, I will. I think the part of the weaknesses I think with the movie is that it's just I was getting frustrated with it. I'll be honest. It seemed like it was one of those movies where it was just like where the character is trying to do something, and
Mhm.
it's just they can't, like, for whatever reason they just they can't, they're kept from doing it, and it's just after a while that gets grating with me, at least with me personally. That gets really frustrating after a while.
Well, okay, so like you were seeing the objective of okay, the objective is he wants to get to Amanda, but it's not even like he was making constant progress towards getting back to Amanda. It's just he kept getting sidetracked.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely understand that.
Yeah,
I didn't I wouldn't have used the word frustrated, but it was losing my interest a bit in the middle.
yeah,
Um, Now, as far as and also, I would say Amanda herself is kind of a brat. In
yeah,
fact, remove the kind of. Amanda is a brat.
yeah, she is.
Like
Yeah,
she is a terror to her mother, doesn't do anything she's told, very self-centered, which is why I was surprised that she was old enough to go to school once I actually got a good beat on her personality.
Yeah.
Because like I would have believed anywhere from like 4 to 6.
Yeah.
Um, so I was actually, I feel bad for saying this, but it was almost kind of a relief when she got hit by that car because she isn't all that compelling of a character.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, and she's like largely absent for the movie. Yeah.
Yep. So they gave her the proper amount of development. You can see why Roger is loyal to her, and also why and I would say some of the better scenes in the movie are her mom dealing with this emotional impact.
Yeah.
Um, Now, as far as other non-spoiler thoughts, what did you watch this in? Did you watch this in English or Japanese?
I watched it in English, and yeah, everybody had a British accent.
Yeah, and so I watched like the first 15 minutes in English, and I said, I can't do this anymore, and switched over to Japanese. I don't know what it is because you recall I did the same thing for Blue Eye Samurai.
Yeah.
There is something about Netflix's stable of English voice actors for anime that just drives me up the wall every time. And I don't know what it is because it's not like I'm a subtitles only guy for shows on Crunchyroll or High Dive or whatnot. Like I'll happily
Yeah.
watch whatever seems most convenient to like basically I often watch shows with others, so I tend to just go with whatever seems the most convenient.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that too with there was a series called Hero Mask that I watched. I think I watched the first season of it,
Mm-hmm.
and I watched it in Japanese first. And it was like this. It took place in Britain, and
Mm-hmm.
I watched it in Japanese first, and I thought it was pretty good. And then I tried watching the English version, and it was god awful. Like the voice actors were flat. I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I'm sure there are fine actors if you catch them in person. Just voice acting is a very different talent.
Yeah. So, well, okay. So I looked up. I'm looking at the Wikipedia for the movie. Haley Atwell voiced Lizzie, Amanda's mother,
Hmm.
in the English version. She's Peggy Carter in
Oh,
the
okay.
in the MCU, um, and LeVar Burton voiced one of the characters.
Was he the cat?
No, he was the dog,
Oh, okay. Yeah, the old dog
the
who
old
was
dog.
the mother's imaginary friend who you
Yeah.
meet.
Yes.
Now, let's look at this from the. So I'd say, like, let's say it's an okay enough time. I could see small children getting kind of bored in the middle because there isn't as much whimsy as I was expecting from the first half,
Yeah, and
or I should say from the opening scene.
yeah, and uh, it's also dark in a few places, and it might get them a little riled up.
Yeah, like I identified several spots in the movie where you would probably be dealing with a crying child
Yes, yeah,
because they managed to hit you like they managed to set things up like when Amanda gets hit they set it up perfectly like you don't actually see it happen but you know it happened and like it's full of tension and gut wrenching.
yeah,
um
yeah.
the character over there what's the leader of the imaginary friends
Emily.
Emily. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Emily gets shot with some sort of finger beam by Mr. Bunting. And
Yeah,
then all of the other imaginary friends, except for Roger, have forgotten her completely.
yeah,
And that's what just hit me a bit ago is that, okay, what if the reason that they think that Mr. Bunting is a myth is that one of the like friends from the past who had told them about Mr. Bunting um, got eaten by him. Like they were he was chasing them down. He managed to they stayed way ahead of him for a bit. He eventually got them. What if everybody else just forgot where they heard this story, so they assumed it was just a story?
uh, okay.
I don't know if that's the authorial intent, but that actually ties together decently enough for me.
Yeah.
But and I'd say the ending is maybe I missed a detail, but it seemed like Rudger was falling apart anyway, even though he was reunited with Amanda.
Yeah.
So, but like, why? Like, she's still being imaginative, and everything seems to be okay.
Well, she had been in a coma for
Like,
for a couple of days.
I guess, but okay. There's another element in this movie that I thought was really funny, but okay, it's funny from like a meta perspective, but I could also see parents being disturbed by it, and I could see children being confused by it.
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So one of the elements they have here is that similar to other things about abandoned imaginary friends, you can end up getting adopted by a new child. Like one of the minor characters ends up having that happen to him in the middle of the movie. We kind of glossed over the part where like every night they get assignments to go help these kids, and that's where those Polaroid pictures are.
Right. Yeah. And they basically be their imaginary friends for a brief period of time. They like with them they so like Roger and Emily and the others, they were
it's like a space adventure. Yeah.
Space adventure. Yeah, they were playing with this kid doing a space adventure. Yeah.
And then he decided he really liked one of them, and the little skeleton guy transmogrifies into a panda, which is what he really wanted as his imaginary friend. So like just whatever you were before gets overwritten.
Yeah.
And Roger ends up with one of Amanda's classmates who's super into ballet, who turns him into a girl, a ballerina. Okay, so I could see parents being like, parents being, if they're dealing with a small child who they think won't cry when they see multiple people die, they might not want to have conversations about that, because Roger gets the full whammy for a bit. Like he starts like, if you're listening to it in Japanese, he starts using female pronouns. The voice actress in Japanese switches from doing a little boy voice to doing a little girl voice. He's brainwashed for a bit before he gets knocked out of it. So that's like, there's a lot of what I would call like mind warping in this movie.
Yeah.
Which is a it's just a thing to be aware of. Now, where I think it's funny from a meta perspective is that it's former Studio Ghibli people, and once Emily dies, they were suspiciously close to having a Ghibli-esque film with a male protagonist. So I guess they had to fix that for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which when you consider that almost all the other ones, like even like Princess Mononoke, is really more the point of view character of I can't remember his name 20 years after watching it, but the young adventurer, the style character is still the woman raised by wolves, Princess Mononoke. But
yeah.
So it just struck that's what just struck me as really funny was you couldn't handle it. You couldn't handle having no young girl character on this screen, could you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I wanted to like this one a lot more than I did, especially because I felt like it had a nice, strong opening.
Yeah.
If I look at it from the perspective of a parent considering showing this to the kids, I think I actually wouldn't, just because, again, multiple scenes where you're gonna have a crying child, awkward questions in the transformations sequence, and then a little bit on the meandery side, like the part that you were frustrated about, where it didn't seem to have a strong through line.
Yeah.
And what was the other one? Yeah. Also, Mr. Bunting and his assistant are just scary in places, like horror movie scary.
Yeah. Yeah, he bothered me a lot. Yeah.
He definitely comes off as like a P-file.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe that was the intention.
Yeah. So and that's why I felt a little comfortable spoiling things. Uh, I don't think that a lot of adults would get much out of it,
Yeah.
aside from some nice animation.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's decent enough, I think. But it's
yep,
yeah, it's not nothing, it's not you know, like you said, it's not Princess Mononoke, it's not like, you know, it's not gonna wow anybody.
yeah. I think that's the thing. It makes me kind of curious to watch their previous movie, Mary and the Princess or the Witch's Flower, just to see if because like I looked up reviews for the novel this was based on, which wasn't Japanese. I believe it was an English novel, and it seemed like it had kind of middling reviews there too, which makes you wonder what spoke to the studio to adapt it.
Yeah, I don't know. Um,
So, so maybe just a lack of source material.
Probably,
But,
yeah.
but Daniel, speaking of things with questionable source material,
Yes.
uh, Richard Meyer's indie comic book Mind Your Business.
Okay, so I've been curious about this one. Because a lot of Myers books, especially his, the smaller ones can be interesting. Like the Ballad of No, for instance.
Yeah, Ballad of No is the first one that came to mind, where and it's actually in the same continuity as that with the same artist.
Okay.
Uh, in fact, like there's a sample of the interior art. So it's a black and white comic that Richard Meyer came out with. Well, he funded it a couple years back and shipped it out. I want to say late last year. I've had it sitting on my shelf for a bit,
Mm,
maybe earlier this year. He
yeah.
kind of tends to get behind on his comics. I would honestly say that if I ever review one of his comics and it sounds interesting to you, wait for him to do one of his Zach Friday sales because you know that he's basically just moving existing inventory, so you should get it fairly fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, this one I didn't enjoy nearly as much as Ballad of No. Uh,
Mm.
and so what I'll say is, what I said, speaking of questionable source material, it's spawned from a meme at the time called "Mind Your Business," where people would just like accost each other in short YouTube or TikTok videos, like, "Hey, what are you doing? Mind your business."
Yeah.
That Zach watched a lot of,
Yeah.
um, or Meyer watched a lot of. And then the other thing it was inspired by was he kept saying it's okay to just have Batman punch a guy who was stealing a TV. Because where the story starts is you have this TikTok influencer who his shtick is that he finds these old Katie bars that haven't been made for 2 years and eats them to see if they're still good,
Uh,
which is already a strange premise.
yeah.
And he decides he needs a new gimmick because they're just about out of these candy bars, and the last of them were bought up. And he comes across a young man who, actually, I guess a guy his own age who's stealing a TV, and he decides that he's going to try to stop him for clout? Question mark. And this ends up leading into a conspiracy where the TV was bought by somebody, and the two of them team up, and the conspiracy is like a bunch of extremists of some sort who are being paid by, I believe, the Taliban. Yeah, the Taliban to sabotage them.
Uh, uh, has Zach been listening to too much Alex Jones?
It sounds like it, doesn't it?
Well, the Taliban they're trying to come after us, and they bought this TV, and they're
Yeah, and and then it ends with like what they were saving up the money for. Like what the guy was stealing TV for was to send his friend to Ukraine to serve in like the volunteer corps, and the friend does not appear until the last page. In fact, this is the friend getting to Ukraine and introducing himself to some of the soldiers. On the last page. And then the very last page is Zach kind of going through it, and just a conversation with a hypothetical reader who's frustrated with what's going on, as if he knew that this idea was dumb.
Yeah.
Because it's like, and it's weird for somebody who made his career out of saying that people like shouldn't try to write smarter than they actually are.
Yeah.
That he kind of got up his own butt with this, as the nicest way I can put it.
Yeah. Ooh.
So now I'll say the art is nice, though I did notice some anatomy and perspective issues in places. Like if you can see his hand in the back there, I noticed a few issues like that where like that one's a matter of foreshortening, but I would see like hands that were that size in a couple of panels where there wasn't that sort of foreshortening. Or is it background? Is it for lengthening? Whatever it is, perspective.
Yeah.
It's very much a Shaggy Dog story, and it's weird why the guy decides to get involved with this. It's weird why the two of them team up in the middle after he had basically been harassing the thief the whole time.
Yeah.
It's like it's just like the chase for clout, and I feel like the point of it is that the chase for clout is stupid, because I think this guy who went to Ukraine, and by the way, on the last page, Zach said that also he died 2 weeks later, mortar strike or something like that. I think that if I were to try to assign a point to this, it might be that people do stupid things for clout. That can just get them in trouble. But the thesis is not well developed. Also, the main characters from Ballad of No and Pandemic show up. I would say that the saddest thing about this whole, this is called the Theosophy universe, which he admits that doesn't actually have anything to do with what Theosophy actually means, which was just a cultic movement from the early 20th century created by this sham psychic called Madame Blavatsky.
I think I've heard of her.
Yeah, she had interesting beliefs. Very influential occultist. Also a virulent racist, but it's that comes with the territory. But like the title came to him in a dream, and I think that if he just had a more consistent release schedule, he could actually develop the universe into something cool.
Yeah.
Because so the premise of Theosophy is, we have this, and this has never been illuminated in any of the comics, mind you. This is just me remembering things from like him doing videos where he talked about it. So if you're a reader, who doesn't actually follow his YouTube channel for some reason, you've just read 3 semi-related stories that just are a series of Shaggy Dog stories. The underlying thesis of this universe is that there are these families who are basically like Illuminati, but with like Game of Thrones houses, I guess. And every so often they have a challenge to see who will run the world for the next 100 years or so. And the premise is that you have one of the families who says, it's very expensive to run the world, that we don't feel like spending that much money, but we have to compete. So it's them coming up with a team of ringers to try and lose without it being too obvious that they're throwing.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing. I actually really love that idea. I think that if you gave that idea to a mangaka, in a few years you'd have a really kick-ass anime.
Yeah.
But because Zach works kind of slow, because the artist, let's see what's the name of the artist again.
Wasn't it Kelsey Shannon?
Kelsey Shannon, thank you.
Yeah.
Kelsey Shannon is I actually really like Kelsey Shannon's black and whites here in this one and in Ballad of No.
Yeah.
I think that if Zach just doubled down and got Shannon on some sort of consistent schedule, and they came out with 6 of these a year, and actually developed the underlying premise of the universe,
Yeah.
you would have something cool here. As it is, it's basically a failed episode of The Twilight Zone, basically, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what it sounded like to me. And the Ballad of No reminded me of that too. It reminded me of like a one-off episode of either The Twilight Zone or maybe The Outer Limits, or something along those lines.
Right. Just No had a much stronger central premise.
Yeah.
But speaking of comic books, there we go. That's our transition.
There you go. There we go. There's a transition.
Daniel finally caught up with the rest of us.
Yes, I did. Yeah. Deadpool and Wolverine finally dropped on Disney Plus. So I watched it last night. I will. I'll try not to talk too much about the plot, because DB already covered that when he did his review of the movie when it came out. Did you see it opening day or opening weekend?
It was either opening weekend or the weekend after opening weekend.
Okay,
I got in there pretty fast.
Yeah, but yeah, you were very early on, much earlier than me. But yeah, so basically, this movie, the Deadpool's universe is collapsing because Logan died at the end of Logan. And he needs to find another anchor being to save the universe, his universe, which is like the Fox movie universe. And of course, Wade's going through a bit of a lot of personal issues, because he and what was his Vanessa, I think was his girlfriend, right? Yeah, Vanessa. Yeah, he and Vanessa broke up, and how did he get to Earth 616? Did he use Cable's like time jump device, or?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I was wondering that, like when he's sitting there, he's in Happy's office, interviewing for the position with the Avengers. I'm like, well, how did he get there? That was a little weird.
I have a better question for you. Why is Happy Hogan the first step in the Avengers recruitment process?
Yeah, I don't know that either. Seems a little odd.
The clear answer being, of course, what actor could they get?
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, so Wade couldn't get into the Avengers, and now he's selling used cars, and then he's getting followed by the TVA, and then they bring him in and they tell him about what's going on, and see the opening sequence where he's desecrating Logan's grave. Sheesh. And then but yeah, so then Deadpool gets the TVA device and goes around. He's hopping around the multiverse trying to find a version of Logan. And then of course I got spoiled on the scene, by the way, with Henry Cavill as Wolverine.
Okay, so I want your opinion.
Okay.
I was actually pretty unimpressed with him as Wolverine and feel like we dodged a bullet there.
Yeah, he didn't fit. Yeah, he didn't fit as Wolverine. I think he would be better off as somebody else I don't know, a different Marvel character. Maybe Reed. No, maybe not Reed Richards, but like.
Yeah, let's see. Who in Marvel would actually kind of look like him? That's something that's interesting, is like a lot of the DC characters, probably because of when they came out, just had black hair because it was probably easier to draw black hair.
Yeah.
In the late 30s, early 40s.
Yeah.
But a lot of Marvel characters actually are brunettes or blondes or redheads.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so then he
off topic.
Yeah. But then he finds Logan, version of Wolverine who is, let's just say, really down on his luck, and then the TVA guy called it was called Paradox. They send him to the Void, and that's where they meet all the other rejected Marvel characters throughout the movie verse. And of course, the Void is run by Cassandra Nova, and I'm going to be honest, I had never heard of her before.
So she's, to the best of my knowledge, she's really been heavily involved in 2 comic runs that I read. She probably also got involved with the Krakoa era stuff because everybody was involved in Krakoa, but that's a bad run of comics anyway. But
yeah.
So Cassandra Nova is a Grant Morrison fever dream, like many of his ideas. And it would be too easy to just go, oh, Professor X has an evil twin sister who has been in the background this whole time. No, she's like, it's like this, like, oh, well, there's this idea in Shi'ar mythology where in the womb your opposite is born or is conceived with you, and you must defeat it in the womb, and then you're born. But his Professor X's dark half was that it was basically fetal tissue, and eventually became Cassandra Nova because the sheer might of her telepathy.
Oh, jeez.
As memory serves, I remember reading this when I was in early college, I think it would be, and my brain, also hi Arcos, but my brain just immediately wanted to crawl out of my head and forget that concept ever existed. So if I got the fine details wrong, pardon me.
Yeah.
But that's the easiest. Like, it's one of those things where you can explain what there's 2 ways you can explain who, say, Cable is. Explanation 1: he's a cool mutant super soldier from the future with big guns and a robot arm. And for most stories that he's in, that's all you need to know. You can also get into, let's see, Cable is the child of Cyclops of the X-Men and Madeline Pryor, the clone of Jean Grey, who was the Goblin Queen, and he was infected with a techno-organic virus by Mr. Sinister, and so to cure him, they sent him to the future, and eventually he came back as an old man.
Yeah.
So what is he? So how does he function? Well, he's a big cool guy with big guns and a robot arm.
Yeah.
So evil Professor X twin sister is basically the best way to think of her.
Yeah. So then the rest of the movie is basically like Deadpool and Wolverine trying to get out of the Void and then getting back to the universe so they can save it from Mr. Paradox, who's just going to use this MacGuffin called whatever it was, like a time thing to erase their timeline, because ordinarily once the anchor being dies from a timeline, it takes like thousands of years for the timeline to disappear. But he's like, nah, that's gonna take too long. We just need to do it right now.
I don't want to have to wait around for that. This assignment sucks.
Yeah. So I thought overall I enjoyed the movie. I think I like this one better than Deadpool 2.
Deadpool 2, I almost want to rewatch because I think that the big thing that drug Deadpool 2 down was actually the little boy.
Yeah.
Or I should say the large boy, the obese little boy.
Yeah.
Who just wasn't a fun character to watch at all.
No, he was annoying.
Yeah. But like there were some nice scenes in there, like didn't Juggernaut rip him in half?
Yeah. He said, I'm gonna rip you in half now.
Yeah. Or for that matter, the bit where with the X-Force where they've recruited them all and then they
all just die.
Yeah. But no, this is definitely the better movie just because it doesn't have too many things dragging it down.
Yeah. And it's got enough, there's we were talking before the show. There's quite a bit of inside baseball as far as Marvel Comics with this movie. Like we were saying, like Cassandra Nova being one, and then like you have all the other like rejected Fox Marvel, characters showing up. Like
Mhm.
uh, I'll confess, like I never saw the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie, or Elektra. Um,
You're okay. The Daredevil Ben Affleck movie, I think, is overhated.
mm,
Like, it's not amazing, but I thought it was perfectly fine. Elektra is probably still the worst superhero movie I've ever seen.
ooh,
Now,
ooh.
mind you, you've seen the Eternals, so maybe your scale would be different, but
Yeah,
I
probably,
still
yeah.
can't recommend it.
Yeah. But like an inside baseball would be like the fact that Ben Affleck and Jennifer Gardner were married in real life
Mhm.
for a period of time. And then when they say, "Oh yeah, Daredevil died trying to stop Cassandra Nova," and Deadpool is like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and she's like, "Nah, it's okay."
Yeah.
I would say the big inside baseball with that would be, well, like Channing Tatum playing Gambit, because like you would have to really be in the know to actually know that that Fox have been trying for years to make a Gambit movie with Channing Tatum.
Which is really funny because, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Gambit a black guy in Wolverine Origins?
No, it's a white guy.
Who am I? Was there a bishop in there for no reason?
No, it wasn't Bishop. It was a different character. It was played by Will I Am from Black Eyed
Yeah,
Peas.
yeah. Who? Not important. For
Yeah,
some
yeah.
reason, for some reason it had like shifted around in my brain that he was playing Gambit in that one.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I think.
You know what? Now I'm
Yeah.
bothered. You keep talking while I look that
Okay.
up.
Yeah, and so but yeah, I think this overall I enjoyed this movie. It's probably more violent than the other Deadpool movies, but not as raunchy. Um it has, there are a few bits here and there where it's just like, okay, that's a little much, but overall, it's an enjoyable movie. I liked the interactions between, Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. I thought they played off of each other really well. Um, and part of me thinks that this might be the only time they do a movie together, but I highly doubt it, given how much money this movie made.
Right. Even if they don't make another Deadpool Wolverine movie, somebody at like Warner Brothers or somebody is going to come up with some sort of buddy movie for them to do together.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, and I did also like the scene with all the Deadpools showing up.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, Deadpools are a dime a dozen in the void, and nice pool. Poor guy,
Yeah.
man. But yeah, if you're like me and you hadn't seen it yet, definitely give it a watch. Like I said, it's on Disney Plus. But if you don't want to watch it there, it is also out on physical media and digital. So
Yeah. After digesting it since it came out, I think it's well, and we were talking about how much inside baseball there is.
yeah,
The thing also made like $1.5 billion or something close to it.
yeah,
So
thereabouts. Yeah.
so I think that the big lesson is that you can be inside baseball as long as you're entertaining, because I think that most of the scenes would still be funny, even if you didn't get even if you didn't get the joke being made. Ryan Reynolds' delivery and charm would make up for a lot of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I still like the part when Wesley Snipes, he's about to shoot the rocket launcher. He says, "There's only one blade. There's only going to be one blade." And he
Deadpool.
looks at the camera like, "Yeah, did you
It's
hear that? You get that?"
And what do you know? It turned out that was pretty much true.
Yeah, it was.
But yeah. But Daniel, speaking of bromances and possibly frustrating movies,
Yeah.
Daniel, did you pick your feet in Poughkeepsie?
Yeah. Yes, I did. Popeye's here.
Yep.
The French,
So
the French
we
Connection.
watched
Yeah.
The French Connection, a
Yes, sir.
movie that. So you know how there are certain movies that you know the name, but you don't know anything else about it. It's just like a movie that you hear people occasionally rattle off on lists of greats or whatnot.
Yeah, yeah.
That was the French Connection for me. I honestly had no idea whatsoever what this was about. I assumed there was possibly some scenes in France. But even then, I couldn't be sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're right. There were a couple scenes in France.
Yep. Now, had you seen this one before?
I had. I watched it in college, so it had been about 20 years since I'd last seen it.
Okay. Yeah. So I mentioned I found this one slightly frustrating, and I think it's because it achieved its goals so perfectly. But that sounds weird to say, but this is not a typical cop movie or drug bust movie of any sort.
No, it isn't. It's a product of its time because it came out in 1971 at the height of the Hollywood nihilism that was very rampant at that time in the industry.
Yep.
And it was also when movie studios were barely hanging on, and so they basically just told filmmakers, go make whatever movie you want, just don't spend a whole lot of money. And a lot of there were a lot of auteur filmmakers that came from that, and one of those was the guy who did this movie, William Friedkin, who also did The Exorcist.
Which, boy, that's a connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said before, this is not interested in being a typical cop movie. What this is it is like a warts and all view of what it is actually like to be a narcotics cop in the 70s.
Yeah, in New York City too.
In New York City specifically.
Yeah.
It's just like, because Daniel, in our first review for The Imaginary, you mentioned being kind of frustrated because you didn't feel like all the scenes were necessarily leading up to something.
Yeah.
I think that is very close to how I felt on this one. But it's because, again, it wasn't interested in a pulse pounding action adventure. It wasn't interested in having like a cool buddy cop dynamic between Popeye and what's the other guy's name?
Well, it's played by Roy Scheider, who we're seeing again this week. After seeing him last week in Jaws.
That's right, Buddy Russo.
Buddy, yeah.
Who I think had another nickname, but yeah. Anyway, so you have Gene Hackman as Jimmy Doyle, aka Popeye. You have Roy Scheider as Buddy. But there's a reason that Buddy is not on the cover here, because this is really Gene Hackman's movie.
Yeah. He won Best Actor for this movie.
Deservedly so.
Yeah. And the movie won Best Picture, and I believe Friedkin also won Best Director.
Well, let's find out. I'm sitting on IMDb anyhow. Let's see here.
And a funny story too. Well, not funny, but kind of sad. Hackman actually lost his statue for this movie. He lost it like in a move or something.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I must be missing wherever they have the awards here. Apparently, this thing did earn 51 million worldwide on a budget of 1.8 million. So that's that's some good ROI.
Oh yeah. And yeah. So the basic plot of the movie is you have this French heroin dealer named Alain Charnier. I think I'm pronouncing it right.
Close enough.
Yeah. Although in the cops and everybody call him Frog One because the French are all frogs. By the way, Popeye Doyle is extremely racist.
Yeah, if you go to IMDb and you look at the quotable section, There is not a sentence in here that I feel like repeating
Yeah.
in any context.
Yeah. But Alon is he's looking to sell his heroin in New York, and Popeye and Buddy, they think they're onto something because they've been uh following and watching over these mobsters, because they think they're gonna making this big deal, and so it's basically them watching the bad guys to see if they trip up or make any kind of mistake somewhere. And
Yep. So yeah, there's some pretty long scenes of stakeouts, tailing people by foot and by car.
yeah, yeah, and when you watch the movie too, it has a documentary feel to it. And that's because the cinematographer on the movie, and I remember Friedkin talking about this on the documentary they did about The Exorcist, that the cinematographer that he worked with was a documentarian, so that's why it has that feel to it. Um, and like you said, it's mainly just them, tailing people, following them. There's not really a whole lot of action. Like the only big action scene or the like two action scenes really in the movie. One is the famous car chase, or I guess car train chase,
Mhm.
and then of course the climactic raid on the bad guys.
Right. Which, well, what do you know? My dumb love of action movies. Those were my two favorite parts of the movie.
Yeah.
I also enjoyed early on when it looked like it was going to be more of a buddy cop thing where you had Popeye and his partner interacting with each other.
Yeah.
I always enjoyed it when those two were on screen together because they definitely established an easy chemistry early on.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it is mainly just like a lot of just watching them, watching other people. And I will say too, the one scene in the subway where Popeye, Gene Hackman, he's trailing the main bad guy, and they kind of do that whole thing where they like get off the train, get on the train, and yeah.
Right, just tailing each other. Yeah,
Yeah.
cat and mouse.
Yeah, I like that part of it. And
That was another good scene.
yeah, but yeah, like you're saying, like it's very much a warts and all kind of pop drama, which you normally don't see that much. And anyone kind of from the outside watching this would probably think Popeye's a little incompetent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good way of putting it because like even with the train chase scene, he didn't end up getting anything out of it.
No. Yeah, and yeah, that's part of it, and that might be something that might have frustrated you, is that he never seemed to accomplish anything.
Well, you know, so we're gonna draw a line in the sand here. Past
Okay.
here, there be spoilers.
Okay. Yes.
So overall, I would say that don't go in. Like, I think I part of my mistake is that because of how they introduced the two lead detectives early on, I was
Yeah.
expecting it to be more of a like a 48 hours almost.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite as jokey, but actually they were pretty jokey with each other.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They were.
And then they were mostly separate for the movie, and they had long scenes apart and long scenes of them sitting around waiting for things to happen. So if you go into it with that expectation, you are going to be unhappy. If
Mhm.
you go in with the understanding that you're going to be watching a fairly slow-paced movie, uh, then you will probably enjoy yourself a lot more and just like it's almost atmosphere more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, didn't really accomplish anything. The other thing I'll say that's kind of interesting is every scene. If I was just being like a super tight editor, I think
Mhm.
you could probably shave a half hour off of this movie. But I think there's a lot of flavor for it. like just for example, they catch a car that's being used to smuggle the drugs, and there's like a 5 minute sequence of them tearing this car to shreds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I actually thought it was interesting to watch just because, how often do you go ripping your own car apart, right? Like uh, there's there's layers of foam, circuitry, all sorts of bits that you don't necessarily think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of space in your car to hide something, and you really don't realize it.
Right. Like if you aren't looking to hide something and you aren't willing to rip apart your car, then you wouldn't ever think of it.
Yeah.
So, and like other things, like they were doing a drug bust in one scene, and it went on for a while, past technically where it needed to,
Yeah.
but it was just that documentarian feel of, okay, so you caught a bunch of people with pills in their pockets in a dive bar.
Yeah.
It's going to take you a few minutes to make them all cooperate, get on the wall. You call some of them over,
Yeah.
uh, and just like slowly go through the police procedural.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Now, the reason I drew a line in the sand for spoilers here is that, yeah, nobody gets any serious consequences for what they did in this movie,
No. No, they don't.
which I kind of saw coming a mile away, honestly. I'm actually surprised that Popeye survived past the end of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they have the big drug bust, and some of the bad guys get killed, but most of the arrests they make, they can't make any of the charges stick.
Right. Lack of
Um,
sufficient evidence, suspended sentence,
yeah,
4 years that got parole.
yeah, yeah, and then and Popeye, he's trying to chase down the main bad guy through this abandoned building, and then he ends up accidentally shooting an FBI agent that was working with him.
Yeah. So, yeah, so they get thrown off of, they get thrown out of narcotics.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's just like it's a very realistic, unsatisfying ending on purpose.
yeah, yeah. Much like Chinatown.
Yeah, though if I was gonna watch one of our nihilistic '70s crime dramas again, I would definitely choose Chinatown over this one, just because Chinatown ends on a very dark, grim note, but it had more of a driving focus throughout, and there was more of a mystery that was being unraveled.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas this one, it's just like following bad guys. Yeah,
Pop following basic bad guy or various bad guys.
yeah,
Uh, there were a nice, like again, like I hate like this. I hate when I end up like, like I see what this movie's going for. It does it very well. It's just not for me. But there's
yeah,
also like a lot of little moments that I fondly remember in the movie a few days later.
yeah,
So it's like
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't like it, but I respect it, and there's
yeah,
elements that I really do enjoy about it.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I can see why it wouldn't be for you or for a lot of people. I enjoyed it. I thought it was, it's it's definitely a different kind of a sigh of relief from the normal uh cop movie, cop story, where
Right,
it's not overly Hollywood. um
right. This isn't Bad Boys.
right, yeah, yeah, it's not Bad Boys, it's not like, yeah, or like you said, 48 Hours, or Lethal Weapon, or anything like that. It's a probably the most realistic cop movie I think I've ever seen, in terms of what it's actually like being a cop in real life.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. It just turns out there's a good reason I never thought to become a cop.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I actually gave it a little bit of thought when I was in college, but then I'm like, nah, I better not do it.
Rather not get shot.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's on Netflix, or not Netflix. It's on Max.
So used to it.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I think we've said all we need to say for tonight.
Agreed.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it as always. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hit the bell, all that good stuff. And
Yep.
we'll see you next week. Everybody.
Night.